All right, you guys. So this week we're going to speed things up just a little bit because we're going to talk about psychological methods, methods of experimentation and conducting research. All right, so psychology, again, it's an experimental science. Remember, scientists use the scientific method. So they make assumptions about behavior of chemical compounds, cells, and are people, and those assumptions have to be supported by data and research. So the steps in scientific research, first you got to ask a question. What's going to be your research question? What's going to drive your research or your experiment? You have to form a hypothesis. You have to make an assumption about your research question. You have to test that hypothesis. You have to analyze the results, and you have to draw a conclusion where either you reject your hypothesis or you accept it. And then further beyond drawing a conclusion, you could have forming a theory. So, forming a research question. Most questions arise from daily experiments. Research questions are directed towards behavior and not psychological constructs. Remember, we talked about those last time. Psychological constructs are ideas that cannot be seen or measured directly, like aggression. Psychologists can bring animals or people into laboratories where they can observe the subject in a controlled environment, or they can study their behavior in the field or in their natural environment or habitat. The next part is forming your hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess. This accuracy can be tested through research. Social scientific reasoning uses if then statements. So, example of a hypothesis: if beta fish are put together in a fish tank, then they will fight one another. You guys know the cool little betta fish, the ones that have the little cool things. If you don't, just look them up. I know I didn't give a very good description. Um, I'm sorry. Hypotheses have to be tested to determine if they're accurate. So I can say all day long, if beta fish are put together, then they will fight one another. I can say that all day long, but unless we test that, we won't know if it's true or not. So testing the hypothesis relies on evidence from the experiment and draws conclusion based on that evidence that we just found. So in order to test the earlier hypothesis about the cool betta fish, which I was telling you about, um, then the scientists would either have to put two betta fish together in one tank, or they would have to put a mirror down into the tank of the betta fish to see if it is aggressive or tries to fight itself in the mirror. Um, the mirror would be a little bit more humane approach because sometimes betta fish get to fighting one another and they could hurt one another. Okay. So, analyzing the results, the researchers must ask, what do my findings mean? What came about? Did what I say was going to happen, or did it not? They must interpret the actions that they observe. Researchers, when analyzing the data, are looking for patterns and relationships in the data most of the time, and they look at what supports the hypothesis, but they also look for what does not support the hypothesis. And then they draw conclusions. Conclusions are drawn after the research is analyzed, okay? It's not drawn before you ever test the hypothesis. Conclusions are useful in validating theories of psychology. Validation is the act of establishing the soundness of an idea or theory. If evidence is gathered supports the researcher's hypothesis, then their hypothesis is corroborated or confirmed. Um, if the evidence gathered does not line up with that hypothesis, it does not support the hypothesis, then that hypothesis is rejected. Further steps in scientific research is replication. Okay, for the findings of a study to be confirmed, all right, I mean, this happens every time, it must be replicated. Or repeated. I put replicated on there. It has to be replicated or repeated and produce the same results as before. If the results are not the same on a replicated experiment, the first experiment's put into question, right? Sometimes studies are repeated under different circumstances with different participants, which can lead to different results. And sometimes researchers want to replicate the study by using participants that come from different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, cultural settings, geographic settings. How did those factors play into the different results? Okay, in that replicated study. And oftentimes, after researchers have corroborated or rejected their hypothesis, new questions emerge and the whole process just gets started again. So, that was section 1 on conducting research. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, email me at any time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.